Good morning, digital designers, and welcome to another week of our pen and tablet brush techniques. Our last project before we head off to break is going to be a really fun neon portrait. And this is going to be a project where we're going to be using the pen tablets and some photo reference to create neon glowing signs of some of our favorite characters. I've given you a handout for this on Google Classroom, and you'll see kind of what we're going for here. It's going to be this really cool, somewhat realistic drawing of either a celebrity, an athlete, an artist, a musician, a fictional character. You really can choose whoever you want for this, but we're going to be doing the line work using a special kind of brush technique that will make it look like neon lights. And so when we end up, we'll have this really cool stylized portrait that we can display. And it's even suitable for doing some animation like we did on our holiday cards. So all of the instructions for what I'm about to show you are on this handout, including some screenshots of how to set up your brushes and how to create the glow effect. So if you get lost at any point, please refer to that. You can also follow this link to see what other students have done with this project in the past. And there's some tips for where to go to get high quality textures. We're going to be using this website called Texture Labs to grab some of the background images that your neon sign will display on. Okay, so let's jump right into it. I decided, of course, I'm going to do a Spider-Man one for this. So I found a somewhat good size image. This is a little bit smaller than I would typically use. It's only 600 pixels, but I'm really just using it as reference. This isn't going to show up in my final design at all. So I'm not too worried about it being super high quality. But what I am going to do is jump over to Photoshop and make my new document. And for this, we're going to create a new file. We're going to be doing this in a photo format, and we're going to be using the standard 8 by 10 portrait image. Okay, so that's right here, portrait, 8 inches by 10 inches, 300 pixels per inch. I'm going to call this my last name, first name. So we'll go Roper Zach, and this is going to be neon portrait. Okay. And then I'm going to actually make my background for this black this time because that'll allow me to see my lines a lot easier and see the glow effect when I add it in. Okay, so we just change it to black, hit create, and boom, there's my canvas. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is bring in that photo. I just copied and pasted it, and I'm going to enlarge it up. You'll notice that as I enlarge this photo, it's going to lose a lot of its quality. But for this particular project, that's okay because, like I said, I'm just using it as a reference image. I'm going to turn down its opacity, probably around like 50% or so, just so I can see enough of it. And I'm going to lock this layer so that it doesn't move while I'm painting. Okay. And all of my neon lines are going to be on a new layer up above this. So I'll create a new layer and we'll call this layer neon lines. Get in the habit of labeling your layers, guys, because this is going to really come in handy as we go. The other thing that you might want to do for this project is have different colored neon for each layer. So for example, I'm probably going to use red for the outline of Spider-Man's head here. And then I might have some other lines that are either in like a dark blue or a white for the mask and the spider lines in here. So what I'll do is I'm just going to call this one red neon lines, and that's what I'll start with. Now, on the handout for the project, I gave you guys some suggestions for the brush settings that you can use for this. So let me jump over to that. And I recommend for this using a round hard edge brush set to 15 pixels. We're going to turn the smoothing up a little bit, but that's going to give me a nice clean edge as I draw. Okay. So I'll come back over. Let's take our brush tool, and I'm going to go to my general brushes category all the way up to the top. Let's move this up here. There we go. And we're going to take just a hard edge brush. We're going to set it to 15 pixels. And we're going to turn our smoothing up to about 30-40%, somewhere in there, so we get a nice smooth line. Okay. And then really for this first stage, all we're going to do is go in with a white brush and we're going to outline where we want those neon lines to be. Okay. So I'm going to start off by outlining the shape of Spidey's heads here. Oops, let's turn my smoothing up just a little bit more. All right, we'll go do, 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 do. And I'm gonna go around the edges here. And to really play off the neon effect on this, I want my lines to be as continuous as possible. Okay, meaning that they're actually gonna stay connected at all stages of the design. So every line should connect to another line here. So you can kind of see how I'm doing this. I'm going around the edge. I'm gonna bring this down right here. Create a little neckline right there. You got to kind of use your imagination for some of this. And then I'll also go ahead and do the lines of his eyes. Okay, so I'm going to put a line right there. And we'll do one that comes right up here. If you make any mistakes, like I did right there, that's kind of wobbly, just Control Z to go back one step. And you can always refine the line and get it nice and smooth. Okay. Don't be afraid to use that undo if you need it. All right, so I'm going to pause the video for a minute while I work out some of these lines, and I'll be right back. Okay, great. So I've got my basic line work on Spidey done here, and I can see most of his features are working pretty good. Now I'm going to do his webbing pattern on a separate layer here. So I'm going to go ahead and lock up the neon lines, and I'll make a new layer right above it. We'll call this web lines this time. And again, I'm just going to go in, again, using my white brush. I might make this a little bit smaller this time because the webs are a little bit more detailed. So I'll make it 10 pixels. And I'm going to just zoom in and start to add in those web lines. So he's got one going right here. Ooh, a little bit wonky there. So I'm just going to do this as smooth as I can. You can tell I've really got my smoothing turned up here so that as I draw, I'm not getting shaky lines. We want them to be as smooth and clean as possible. Okay, so don't be afraid to turn up smoothing on this particular project. The smoother lines you get, the better here. All right, let me pause it up and I'll be right back. All right, so now that all of our line work is done, we're gonna zoom back out here. You guys can see kind of how this looks with the separate lines for red and white. I'm gonna go ahead and hide my photo layer right now so you can see how this design will look on its own. Now this is where we start to add in our neon glow effect. And all of the instructions for this, guys, are on the handout. Let me jump over there so you can see the blending options for the glow effect. And what we wanna look for, make sure that this is actually showing for you guys. That's odd. Why is it hidden? Let's bring this out. Okay, so on the blending options for the glow effect, here's what we're going to select. We're going to do lighter color at about 35% opacity, and then we're going to select the color for our glow from right here. So let's see what that looks like in Photoshop. First thing we'll do is come over to the red neon lines, and I'm going to right click this layer and go to blending options. And what we're going to look for is the blending option called outer glow. Okay. Now, when you select outer glow, it should start glowing almost immediately, but we're going to change some of the settings to get an even better look. I'm going to go to this blend mode and I'm going to change it to lighter color. And then I'm going to pick the color that I want that neon to be. So in this case, for Spidey, I'm going to make it a nice red glow. And we can adjust our opacity here. We can adjust our spread to make the glow expand beyond these normal settings. And I can adjust the size so that I get a nice red glow coming off of those lines here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. You may have to play around with these settings to get them looking exactly the way you want, but with a little bit of practice, it shouldn't be too hard to do. Okay, so now that I've got those lines in there, that looks awesome. I think I'm also going to try an inner glow here, and I'm going to set this to also be red. And then we'll adjust, let's see what settings. Let's put in, we can try a few of these and see which one's going to give us the best look. There's pin light, there's linear light, hard light. Actually, you know, the one that I think is going to work best for me here is something like multiply. Okay. And by turning up the opacity, I can make that color brighter. I can also adjust the choke settings and the size settings to make this kind of glow. Let me zoom in so you can see what's doing here. The inner glow actually creates a little bit of a glow effect inside the line. So this is really helping sell that neon effect by making the lines look a little bit rounded like a neon tube. Okay. So again, play around with the settings. You can see what mine are here. I'm going to go ahead and click OK because I'm pretty happy with that. And already I've got a nice neon glow for this. And I can copy these settings and put them on any other layer I want. So what I'll do is right click this layer. I'm going to copy the layer style. I'll come up to my web lines now and I'll paste that layer style and it will add the effect right on top so they look identical to each other. If I decide I want to change any of these colors, like I want to see maybe what it looks like in blue, let's go to the, we'll double click the outer glow setting here. And all I'm going to do is change this from red glow to blue glow. Okay, and I'll do the same on the inner glow. Let's come up that and we'll change it from red to blue. All right, that's looking pretty cool. And if I hit OK, those are all set. You might also want to move some of your layers around. Like I actually want my red lines covering up my blue lines, so I'm going to move that up on top. You can also go in if you need to modify anything. Like I'm noticing I went a little bit too far right here. So I'll take my eraser. I'll just push that line back anywhere where you want to clean it up. All right, we got a pretty cool neon sign now. Let's go get some textures for this. I'm going to run back over to the website that I shared with you called Texture Labs. And when I think of Spidey, I'm thinking of like brick walls and New York City streets. So I'm going to look for some brick textures to use as my background here. Let's go to textures. And over here, you've got some categories. I'm going to choose brick. And I want to find a nice brick wall to use for this. Let's do, that one looks pretty good. I'm going to grab the high res version and download it. There we go. And I'll go ahead and look that up in my downloads folder. And I'm going to drag it into Photoshop. Boom. Okay, let's move this behind our neon lights. Zoom out. I'm going to use transform to make it big enough to fill the whole screen. And then I'm going to move it all the way back behind my line work. We'll see how it looks. Okay. So you can see because this image was a little bit lighter than the neon, it's getting hard to see that glow. I want to make this layer a lot darker so that my glow really pops off of it. So a couple different ways I can do that. First one would be to come down here to these little dots and we're going to add an adjustment layer. And let's start with brightness and contrast. So I will turn down the brightness on this layer to make it darker. Okay. I can also adjust the contrast here. Okay. I want to darken it up a little bit. Let's see if I can add another one. Let's do, we'll try hue and saturation. Maybe turn the lightness of this layer down a bit. There we go. I could adjust the saturation if I want those bricks to be lighter or darker. And that is going to give me that look that I'm kind of going for here. Okay. Up above these, I'm going to add one more layer, and this is where I'm going to do a little bit of shading. I'll take my black brush, and I'm going to switch to a soft brush here, one of these big puffy ones. Make my brush really big. And I'm just going to use this brush to create a little shadow around the outside of my design. Okay, I'll set this to multiply so it actually makes that layer a little bit darker. And as I turn my brush settings up, you can see I can kind of burn a little spotlight onto here. Adjust my opacity. Emerson, thank you again. And I'm pretty happy with how that's turning out. Let's save this up as a Photoshop file. File, save as. We'll add it to my desktop as Neon Portrait. And from there, it's just about adding some extra details, okay? So have fun with this. We're going to spend a couple days working with your brush tools and putting this all together, and I'll check back with you in a future video.